One of my ancestors, Sergeant Major Radcliffe there, he was a slave in Virginia, and he joined the United States Colored Troops, and he served actually in the 38th United States Colored Troops. Rose to the rank of sergeant, and then afterward he became sergeant major. My connection stems from the fact I've always loved history, and part of my upbringing was learning about my family, where they came from, what they did. And my mother and father were instrumental in passing that along to me, and I always remembered and cherished what they told me. And when I got to a place in my life where, I was mature, I documented and I did research. And I always had a love of history of what happened during the Civil War. And that's been from when I was a youngster. But when opportunity arose, I was able to enlist and participate in an organization that was phenomenal. The men I served with in Company B, the 54th Massachusetts, are and still my brothers. The brotherhood, spirits of our ancestors, spirits of my parents, they all encompass me to do what I'm doing. And I feel in my heart that they appreciate what we've done. It's not just me, it's these guys here, those fellas there, that freedom sign. They were forgotten. They were scorned, mistreated. But what I love about them, these men in here, and my family, my father, my uncles, they all served, is the dignity and pride that they endured what they did. My dad, he was like my best friend. He fought against Hitler. He went all the way through Europe. And when he came home, and some of my uncles came home, somewhere in the Pacific, somewhere in Europe, but they came home and they wanted something better. Because you gotta remember, they were children of the Depression. Nobody was getting anything. And they endured a lot. In our cases, blatant racism. But they still went, they still served, and a lot of them didn't come home. So I carry that with me always, as far as honor. That jar, the sand in it, I took that jar from Morris Island, South Carolina, site of the Battle of Fort Wagner, where the 54th Massachusetts, on July 18th, 1863, made their famous charge. Those men fought, bled and died, and then they had to stay on that island because Charleston had to be surrounded, and the temperatures were unmerciful. My wife's family, they served. My father-in-law, he was in Europe in World War II. He's an honorable man. And I always try to emulate my elders, in the good things. Because I'm of the age now, people look at me and I try to carry myself in a way to where I'm honoring my past these men, you know, and I do it for my grandchildren and my missus, you know. So it all ties in to why I wear the Union uniform. Now, when I started into reenacting and studying various parts of the war where black men were concerned, I saw Sergeant Radcliffe's name. His first name was Edward. My dad's middle name was Edward. And then he was a sergeant. My dad was a sergeant. And it just stayed in my head and played with my head a long time before I even mentioned it to anybody. It was like Sergeant Radcliffe was just hanging on my shoulder waiting, you know. And some really interesting things happened along my journey as a reenactor in the 54th, because his name would show up invariably at almost everything I was doing, like speaking engagements and whatnot. And I had mentioned when I spoke at Arlington at the amphitheater, everybody that was there, it was, you know, veterans and dignitaries and what have you. Well, they took several of us up onto the stage, and what we were required to do, or asked to do, wasn't required, we were asked to do were to each take 5 names of an African American that won the Medal of Honor, whether he's Army or Navy. And they just handed them out. All right? Yes. Sergeant Radcliffe ended up in my hands. And, you know, I had my 5 names. I had 2 sailors and 3 soldiers. You know, I'm standing there. I got to go up here to this microphone, to this dais where presidents stand and, you know, big people, you know, and I'm already freaking out because I got to go up here, you know, and my knees were knocking, and I'm thumbing through my names, and there was Sergeant Edward Radcliffe. I said, this is spooky. So anyway, time went on. My godmother, God rest her soul, she lived in Yorktown, Virginia. She knew all the Radcliffes out of Williamsburg and Hampton and down there. And, you know, she told me there was a ton of them. And the gentleman she introduced me to was Sergeant Radcliffe's grandson. He was a World War II veteran. His name was Edward Radcliffe. And my godmother, she was a spiritual woman. She was a minister. And I could take her on her word on just about anything, because she wasn't going to tell me anything wrong. But she said, he is your relative. They are your relatives, I'm telling you. And so the long and short of it was, I made the connection. Never met him before. I made the connection through a couple of phone calls. And we got to talking, and eventually my wife and I went over to Williamsburg. Well, we went to Williamsburg, but we were staying in Yorktown, my godmother's. Williamsburg just down the road. And got to meet him. And on my father's side, it seems like all my relatives, they look the same. They look the same. All my older relatives, I can recall, my older cousins and whatnot, you know, they all look like they could have been brothers, you know. And when I saw Edward, I told my missus, I said, he's one of us. You know, there's no doubt in my mind, right? And so I participated in the battle reenactment that my ancestor won the Medal of Honor in, a place called New Market, Virginia. And it was in the same area as the battle. And we had probably over 125, 130 USCTs came in from everywhere to participate, and we were there 3 days or so, and we were on battleground where my relative won the medal, right? And so they did a lot of advertising for this event, and they treated us really nice. And so after one of the battles, they took all of us over on a bus to this campground, and we had a ceremony for the Medal of Honor winners there. And Edward was there, and a lot of my cousins I didn't even know. I mean, it was easily 30 of them, maybe a little more. They were all sitting together, and we came in, we were in uniform, and we just come out of a battle, and I was doing all I could just to walk. And I saw Edward, and he got up, he hugged me, and he said, "These are cousins," and everybody started clapping and cheering and everything like that. I ate that up. I enjoyed that so much. And then they put me in the VIP section because they fed everybody. And I sat in the VIP section with all the Radcliffes, and I got really great pictures of all of us together. Little ones, big ones, and it was just great. It was really great, and it was such an honor. I feel like Sergeant Radcliffe was looking down going, "There you go, finally." So I carry that one, and it's just been a good journey. It was an old slave cemetery, and a lot of slaves went to their reward nothing but a rock. No name, nothing. They just buried you, put a rock. That's it. Well, my relatives in Williamsburg and the Yorktown area, they banded together and they went to the federal government and they had the records. And the long and short of it is he ended up getting about 2 weeks worth of press in the Hampton and Williamsburg area papers on his journey. Sergeant Radcliffe and my people over there went to the great extents to get the information. And he ended up with a Medal of Honor headstone. And all my cousins and kin, probably 30, 40, might be more than that, attended the event. And now the slave cemetery is on a site of a naval weapons station. So it's, closed off to the public, but, cemetery is still there. And I'm kind of proud of that picture, because it has a lot of meaning. I try to make an impression on the youngsters that they know what their ancestors went through so they could have what they have. What was sacrificed. I saw it in my lifetime. I grew up during the late 50s and the civil rights movement. Saw firsthand in this country what real ugly is. And you take that decade, and you go back 80, 90, 100 years, I'm thinking it was probably 3, 5 times worse, So, ergo, I have to pay respect to those that came before me. I really believe we're strong people. And we will not be relegated to a lower place or station. That will not happen. Fort Negley, what can I say? I was telling my wife how I felt about it before I came here. Because people want to elevate me personally to another level because of my being here when nobody else was. Never gave it a thought. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm really hard to talk about myself in that light. You know, I was representing Black Civil War soldiers and civilians. They built this place. They built that fort. A lot of it was under duress. A lot of it was under threat. And they were pulled out of various places from their own businesses and church at gunpoint to build this fort. And a lot of them are still buried up on that hill. So it's sacred. It's sacred to me and some others. And even after they built it, they built a string of forts around Nashville, from the Cumberland River to the Cumberland River, east to west. And a lot of them, you know, they had the skills, carpenters and brick masons, just people that had that skill that can't be taught, but you know what to do. So I always treated this place with veneration and respect. And people come and people go with their ideas and their greed and big plans. But it's not allowable. Not to me, not to them. So as long as we're doing what's right, preservation and remembering what occurred here, what was done here, Fort Negley will be always remembered. The city's grown. People come here, they don't have a clue, but then there are people that come here out of respect and they want to know what happened here. Every December 15th or 16th, or the weekend closest to the anniversary of the Battle of Nashville, we set up a camp out here. We have an encampment. And we speak to a lot of people. They come, they want to know. President Lincoln was never in Nashville, and he wasn't here during the battle. But we have a gentleman here who's a very dear friend of mine that portrays Abraham Lincoln, named Dennis Boggs. And he comes out with us and talks to the people about the issues of the day. About 2.5 miles from here, United States colored troops, they did what they had to do. They gave all they had in the Battle of December 15th and 16th, 1864. So we commemorate that. We want people to know and see. And then, like, we do events at schools, various programs, been on public television a few times, and just, you have to enjoy what you're doing. If I didn't enjoy history, and I didn't enjoy learning and sharing with people, this would have got old a long time ago, really. I'm just honoring their legacy. You know, they were young men, you know, and they were in the journey just like me. They enlisted in the 54th, and you know, when you get a closeness like that, it's like the actual military, because you have people that depend on you and you depend on them, and it's very true. Unless somebody's been in the military, they don't have a clue what true bonding is. So these fellas were particularly very special to me, very special. So I commend their memory, and I try to, you know, do right for them and for, you know, these fellas here. And it's been a good journey. It's been a good journey. I've done a lot of things I don't guess I would have been able to do in the States. One of the high honors I can recall is, well, there's two things stand out in my mind. Is we were the honor guard for General Colin Powell in Boston. And we were there as guests of the National Park Service, and we marched in a parade. And we were the honor guard for him and several other dignitaries. And also we opened the memorial to the U.S. colored troops and sailors in Washington, D.C. at that monument. And I spoke at Arlington Cemetery, actually, at the amphitheater, along with a few others, and things like that. They've been many, and I don't brag, but I remember, and I cherish the journey. So it's been good, and in spite of all the TV interviews and documentaries I've done, and movies, and going here and there, you still have to wonder if you're making a difference. That's pretty deep, to maybe just deep to me. People ask me how I feel about being a model for the first statue of an African American soldier in the National Cemetery. I really thought they were just, kidding me. I was looking at it like, yeah, right, They said, no, we're serious. Probably because at the time they knew me as like the first African American reenactor, Union Army in this area. When I was coming up here to Negley, I was by myself for a lot of times. Then things changed and, more guys started coming, but, for a long time, that was it. I used to march in the Veterans Parade by myself, as a Yankee soldier, because, you got 200-300 Confederates, rebel flags and yeehaw, and, got the Southern bells on their arm and everything. And, I was at the Veterans Parade one year, and I just got to the point where I said, this ain't gonna work. This is not good. So I just enlisted myself in the parade. I talked to some people I knew, and they said, yeah, sure, come on. So for a pretty good while, I was by myself, My wife was one of the frontline troops because we were not a large entity. I did the modeling. I was still on duty with the fire department. So I pulled a 24-hour shift at work, go home, clean up a little bit, pick her up, grab some breakfast maybe. They took us out there to show it to us before the real unveiling. And I told them, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. And the people from the newspaper were taking pictures. And so I blindfolded myself, and they carried me out there, and I just faced that away, and they took the tarp off of it, and I was looking at my wife and my best friend, and their eyes just went like that, and I'm saying, oh Lord, it must be bad, and some folks started tearing up, and I'm like, okay, I'll see this soon, and I wouldn't look at it. And first time I saw this when we had the ceremony to unveil it, it's the only one in the country in a VA cemetery, There's one more, my missus just pointed out, in Helena, Arkansas. They put my likeness down there, and it's in an actual freedmen's village that was there during the war. And it was a recruiting depot for colored troops. And they created this beautiful greenway on this historic plot of land. and it's well done. And then they have a statue of me along the Greenway, and it's down low to the ground so people can see it, you know. And the one out to the cemetery, that's on that pedestal I was telling you about. And what's important to me is that 1,900 and there 2,000 brothers buried there, you know. So it's been a good journey. A lot of tears sometimes. These guys here, they had their part in the journey too, because man, it was fortunate to meet, you know, folks that you got something in common with and you can really be for real about it, enjoy one another and go places together, and you're all of one mind. You know, we're all on one focus, on one train. And when you have to let them go back to God, it's hard. It's hard. I'm just grateful that I had them in my life, because they brought a lot to preserve our history, and they were good men.